Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Great Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Well, here it is, a Wednesday, and I have a very serious topic for you today. It is the death of George Floyd. And in case you didn't know, in Minneapolis, just a few days ago, or not a few days ago, it was just yesterday. It was just yesterday. I can't believe it was just yesterday. Just yesterday, a police officer kneeled on George Floyd's neck. And George Floyd was drunk, and he had been resisting arrest. The police officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck for several minutes, and I don't know how many minutes. Maybe it was 15 minutes, maybe it was a half an hour. But George Floyd begged for help. He said, "I can't breathe." His pleas were ignored. He was in handcuffs. And the other police officers, there were 4 police officers at the scene. The other officers did nothing. And they took him away in an ambulance, and that officer did not take his knee off George Floyd's neck until the ambulance arrived. Within a half hour, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. And what was his crime? He forged a check. So kind of a white-collar crime. If he had been white, certainly he wouldn't have had that officer would not have had his knee on his neck for over a half hour, and he probably would have wound up in one of those la-di-da prisons, one of those white-collar prisons where they treat the prisoners real nice, and they get their own cottages, and they make crafts, and they do all the sorts of fun things, and they get to socialize, and they get to watch TV all day. Not George Floyd, because he was black. He was black. That's why he wasn't going to a la-di-da prison. He was going to his death. And that police officer was judge, jury, and executioner. He made the decision whether George Floyd deserved to live or not. He made the decision. He didn't leave it up to a judge or a jury or even an executioner. He just executed him right there on the spot. And this is... why is there so much hate? We know it was a hate crime. We know it was a hate crime because the officer that did it was white and the victim was black. So we know it was a hate crime. Why so much hate? Why is there so much hate out there? I can't even wrap my head around or comprehend why there's so much hate. There's hatred all around. There's hatred everywhere you look. Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, there's hatred. It's just a real problem. And there was a similar case in New York. In recent years, there was a similar case where the black victim said, "I can't breathe," and the officer ignored him, and that he died, and he was in a chokehold. Very similar. And, they're talking about, well, we'll do better training. We'll add some more sensitivity training, and we'll train them better and better and better. We'll train. We'll even overtrain them. But that's not going to change people. If somebody's a racist in their heart, you're not going to change them by training them. You just have to be careful who you hire in the first place. And they should have a psychological. And if the potential officer to be, does not pass a psychological exam, you should not hire him. Period. And there's too many bad cops. I've just encountered a few myself. There's just so many bad cops. They discriminate against women. They discriminate against rape victims. They discriminate against the mentally ill. They're just the worst. Officers can be the worst. And the guy who did this, who had his knee on somebody's neck, he's no hero. He's no hero. He's not a hero. He doesn't deserve free cell phone service. He doesn't deserve free perks. He deserves a prison cell. So, it's awful that, they've been harping ever since the beginning of coronavirus. Ever since the beginning of coronavirus, they've been harping every single day about our heroes. Our heroes. And it's a chance to get in good with the public, and especially with the conservatives in the public, and say, we're going to give our heroes another bonus. We're doing something else special and nice that we don't do for the general public, just for our heroes. And right now, the people who qualify as heroes are the police, firefighters, EMS workers, hospital workers like nurses and doctors, and people who work for grocery stores and restaurants. Anybody who has contact with the public right now is a hero and gets special free bonuses, but especially the police and the EMS and the firefighters. They're getting free cell phone lines, that their monthly payments are covered for cell phone. They're getting free food. They're getting a whole bunch of bonuses free, and they're heroes, right? People that go kill overseas are our heroes. It shows that America's got a really warped view, and who knows where America gets this warped view from. But America does have a warped view. So this whole incident reminds me of my friend James. I can't help thinking of James. Every time something like this happens, I think of James. And I was 8 years old, maybe 9. I think I was 8. And James was my librarian. And James was African American. And he was the nicest man. He was so nice. And he took a special interest in me and a special interest in the books I was interested in. And he had even read, even though they were children's books, he had read some of the books and knew what they were about and could make suggestions to me of other books that I might want. And he gave great suggestions to me. Very, very nice man. Very intelligent, and he always dressed in this 3-piece suit. Not 3-piece, but he always dressed in a gray suit every day, gray suit. He would come to work in a gray suit every day and a suit and tie. And for some reason, the video's kind of choppy. Okay, so he would come to work in a suit and tie every single day. He was waiting for his job to start one day. And because he arrived in a car and he had to be there early for work, and he was outside the library. And the library, they had built a city hall complex where there was the library, city hall, and the police department all within spitting distance of each other. Well, the police came and harassed him in his car. They said, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here. Why are you idling in your car in this parking lot?" They made him show them his ID and give a good explanation for why he was there and why he should be there. They even queried his bosses about him and asked, why is he here? Why is he idling in this car in this parking lot? Just the crime of idling in a parking lot before the library opened. That got him in trouble with the police. And in some cities, the people, there's a bunch of people milling around. They don't even have cars. They're just milling around, standing, waiting for the library to open. They're homeless people, and they have nowhere else to go but the library. And I know somebody else who discriminated against homeless people who show up at the library. So I know somebody who discriminated against homeless people that showed up at the library, and I told her off for it, but she was like, "That's what they are, and that's what they do." She was so prejudiced, and she was so full of herself and so sure she was right. Anyway, so James was harassed by the police. Shortly after this happened with the police harassing him, he was mugged and murdered on the hard streets of Detroit. Wasn't a police officer, and it was, his assailants were also African American, but he lost his life. He lost his life, and I think one of the reasons that he was profiled by these, just like he was profiled by the police, he was also profiled by his muggers. They saw a black man wearing a suit and tie, and they hated him. And they targeted him for abuse. And then they killed him because they hated him. So that was, even though they said it was a mugging, we know it was a hate crime. And back then, I was only 8 years old, they didn't even have such a thing as hate crimes yet. They actually didn't consider charging someone with a hate crime back then. So much hate. There's so much hatred out there. There's so much hate. There's like somebody said recently, it shouldn't be a death sentence being an African American in America. It shouldn't be a death sentence. Being an African American in America should not be a death sentence. But for so many African Americans, it is a death sentence. And what do we do about this? What do we do? And James's death had a profound impact on me. I was so young. I was so young at the time, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand how he could have died or why he died. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I do understand it better. But it's so tragic, and I don't know what we can do about it. There's not much we can do about it because there's so much hate, and there's not much you can do about hate. Once a person set in their ways and their personality set in stone and they've decided to hate, there's not much you can do. It's just the end of all time. Hate. There's so much hatred. There's so much hatred. I don't understand. Even I faced hatred. Even I faced discrimination. And so, I know what it's like. I do know what it's like to be hated. I do know what it's like to be hated. I do know what it's like to be discriminated against. Obviously not to the extent that African Americans are discriminated against, but I've had many more experiences than the average person with discrimination. And I know what it's like to be hated. So, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell you. There is such a thing as microaggressions, and they can lead to larger, more overt aggressions, and just little things and big things, both small and great. So both little and big aggressions and murders and showing hate in public and rallying for hate. Like there's been crowds recently not practicing social distancing that have been protesting wearing masks, and they brought guns with them and said that they would kill the governor of Michigan with their guns. They threatened her life, and they brought their guns with them to a rally, and none of them were wearing masks, and they didn't practice social distancing. They were just mad. They were so mad that they had to wear masks that they were threatening the governor's life with their guns. And they're pro-gun. They're pro-gun people, so they're, pro-gun, basically right-wing nut jobs. Right-wing nuts. And, wing nuts is what they call them. That's the word. Wing nuts. They were wing nuts. And, it's just too much hatred out there. There's so much hate. There's hatred of Republicans for Democrats. There's hatred of conservative whites for blacks or African Americans. There's conservative hatred for gays. There's hatred everywhere for fat people. So obese people are hated by just about everyone for no reason at all. Do I really deserve to be hated? Did I hurt you by being obese? No. I did not hurt you by being obese. You don't like my appearance. It hurts your eyes because you hate my appearance and you're full of hate. So there's that. There's men looking down on women and discriminating against women. There's that kind of hate. There's the hatred of Trump and his followers for Mexicans. Some odd unknown reason they even if they're from America and they've been American citizens for 3 generations, Mexicans get harassed and attacked in public, and they're like, go back where you came from. Why don't white people go back where they came from? Like, why don't they all go back to Europe? They don't belong here. They're not Native Americans. Why don't white people go back to Europe where they came from? And then of course, recently there's been Asian Americans actually being attacked because people who are totally stupid and totally ignorant think they have coronavirus because they're Asians. And they're like, you brought this upon us. You brought coronavirus here. And we think you're infectious, and we think you're going to give us coronavirus, and we're going to kill you. Or attack you. There's been a lot of hate. And ever since Trump took office, it seems like all minorities are under attack. Nobody's safe. Asian Americans, Mexican Americans, and Puerto Ricans, and all sorts of sort of Hispanic Americans, African Americans. Every single group has been under attack. And just people who just look different. They might be Somali, or they might be Iranian, or they might be Greek, or just some other race. They're under attack too. They might even be Greek, Greek people, or maybe Italians or Sicilians. They're just under attack if they look different from a white American. And it's Trump's doing, it's Trump's fault. But that hatred was there before Trump even got there. He didn't start the fire. He didn't create the hate. It's been there. So what can we do? We can keep boycotting these people. We can talk down to these people that are full of hate. We can call them out on their hatred. But there's really not a lot we can do to change them. They're set in their ways. And remember, everybody down here on earth is corrupt. They have corrupted spirits. They're not all there. They're not just quite right. Nobody is quite right. So there's not much we can do. There's not much we can do about hate. There's not much we can do about hatred. Because as long as people have corrupt spirits, it's going to take a miracle to change them. They're going to have to be born in a terrible situation, probably starving to death in Africa, or maybe a slave in Africa working on a chocolate plantation, or starving to death in a little village somewhere. They're going to have to be in a horrible situation, because that's the only thing that's going to change them. They're hardened and they're full of hate. And of course they want to go to heaven. And they want to worship their male god. And they want to be white. And they want to be their preferred gender. And they want this and they want that. And they want to have a nice house and they want to have money. Of course they want those things. But everything they want is going to have to be taken away from them in order for them to change. So that's it. Pray for George Floyd's family. Send money to your favorite anti-hate charity. Maybe the ACLU. I don't know if they're deserving of money or not, but somebody who can try to affect change and who watches these hate groups and keeps tabs on them. And somebody who can. I know Black Lives Matter is out there, and maybe you should join Black Lives Matter or some other group that's anti-hate. But I can't tell you what to do, but you'll decide what the best course of action is. I just keep, even if your relatives are miserable, keep talking to them and try to change them. Just try to be a good influence every day and talk to them a little bit each day. Call them out a little bit each day. I mean, you don't have to talk down to them, but call them out a little bit each day. Say, hey, this isn't okay, this is not all right. And do your best to try to change the intractable. Got it from their parents when they were too young and vulnerable to know any better. And they're set in their ways now. Try to change people like that. I'm Sarah Jane Alphawolf signing off. Don't be for hate. Don't condone hate. Don't support hate. And definitely don't kill anybody. Or do anything that could cause somebody to die. Even not wearing masks could cause somebody to die. So don't do it. Get yourself a mask if you can. There's plenty of masks out there. There's lots of little businesses. They're American made. Yes, they're USA. American made masks. No risk of coronavirus from the masks there. They're out there. They're available. So get yourself a mask and do your part to help others.